West Virginia resound with the sounds of gold and blue football.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 50, the 10, to 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it.
He did it. Patrick White. Touchdown, Tavon Austin.
The Don Nehlen's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels fear to tread.
I think you think that these guys are going to fall over dead for you. Well, I got news for you. They're going to punch you right in the mouth. It's Mountaineer pride.
Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football. West Virginia football.
We've no doubt tonight they shouldn't have played the old Golden Boot. Not this night.
They've done it. They've done it. A perfect season. And the Mountaineers, for the first time in history, undefeated and untied.
Don Nehlen and his Mountaineers, for the second time, have finished a regular season with an unblemished mark.
Ain't no stopping the gold and blue.
It is a great night to be a Mountaineer wherever you may be.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome into another live stream here on the Country Roads webcast channel. And this morning, the Big 12 schedule will finally be released, so we'll know WVU football's conference opponents, and that's kind of what the main topic is here. It's supposed to be coming out around 11 a.m. on various channels. I've got it pulled up here on Max. That's where I'm going to watch it. If you want to watch along, let me pull up the page so you can see what all channels it's on, so you can pull it up on your side there at 11 a.m. We'll be going over that, and I've got a Google Doc I'm going to pull up. I'll fill in the West Virginia schedule as the games come out there. That way we can take a complete look at the schedule. West Virginia has added another JUCO signing, and there will be more signings coming in today. So you can expect another video this evening, or a live stream this evening, or a video in the morning. One of the three there coming, because I'm expecting some more signings to be announced later today. So let me pull up this picture here when they are talking about the Big 12 conference schedule here. Appreciate everybody that's in here. I know daytime live streams. I know some people may be tuned in at work and stuff. That's where I'm heading myself after I get done with the stream, actually, is to work. But happens just in time for me to be able to get this in before I leave for work here in a little bit. So these are the channels that the Big 12 schedule is going to be released on, coming up right at the top of the hour here, just a little over 10 minutes away from the time I'm streaming this here. At 11 a.m. it's going to be released. I'm watching it on Max, but it's on ESPNU, it's on ESPN Plus, FS2, and True TV, all going to be sharing this. I guess it's some type of show releasing the Big 12 schedule, but figured we'd talk about it as it comes out here. That way we can kind of learn about West Virginia's schedule together and see how that plays out. So that's kind of the main thing here that we're talking about. But other than that, until the meantime and in between time, did have a couple topics I wanted to pull up while we wait on 11 o'clock to roll around. One of which being West Virginia picking up another really impressive edge rusher in Marshon Oxley, adding another JUCO player to this class. They've added multiple now that'll be on campus most likely over the summer and coming in for the fall. You know, we've talked about Keenan Eck. We've talked about them really fortifying this defense, and they continue to do that. And this guy is a guy that's going to be a pass rushing threat there as an edge rusher. So let's talk a little bit about the most recent addition of another JUCO signee, and I think you can expect another JUCO name to come in later today. We'll see when that happens. I'll probably be at work when it happens, but like I said, later tonight or in the morning, I'll be talking about some other signings, I feel like. But for now, we can talk a little bit about Marshon Oxley, as we see his commitment here that he shared on social media. If you hadn't seen here, from Hutchinson Community College, he put hashtag committed, hashtag JUCO product, tag in West Virginia football, and you see some of his pictures from when he visited the Mountaineers there. This one, I think, a lot of people were expecting. I certainly wasn't expecting us to take another edge rusher at this point in time. Ended up doing so. And I think we ended up getting a steal with this one, actually, guys. When you take a look at his film, which I'll pull up some of his plays here in a few minutes. But let's take a look at Keenan Cummings here, who's done a good job covering this over at the West Virginia Rivals site there. His commitment 101 in regards to Marshon Oxley, the edge rusher that West Virginia has picked up out of the JUCO ranks. 6'3", 224, so may need to put a little bit more size on, but that can be easily added to. And despite that, with even that frame, you could use him in pass rushing situations. You just may need to beef him up a little bit if you want him to be a four-down type of player. But he's coming off a season at JUCO where he had 12 sacks. He was at Colorado State prior to going to JUCO, and even at Colorado State, he had 5.5 tackles for a loss and 4 sacks in 11 games there. So, has done experience doing it at the FBS level here in Division I, where he had, 4 sacks and 5.5 tackles for loss, then goes to JUCO, doubles that up, 12 sacks there at the junior college level and 42 tackles. You see, Rivals rates him as a 2-star. He's still unrated on 247, actually. A lot of those JUCO players remain unrated. But edge rusher here, picked up offers from West Virginia, of course, Washington State, Colorado State, App State, Western Kentucky, New Mexico State, UTSA, Massachusetts, and Georgia State. He's a native of California, recruited by defensive line coach William Green. Took a visit back on January 25th. 2 years of eligibility remaining, and I think that that's a plus here with this one. When you see coming in at 225, that gives you an extra year if you want to be able to get that size on him, and then he can really play a big part next year. But I think this is a guy that can come in and play a role this season, especially with what he brings you as an edge rusher, because you could have – just think about having multiple really capable pass rushers on the field at one time on obvious passing downs, whether it's Oxley here, whether it's Jamori Robinson, Braden Siders, Keenan Eck, even another JUCO addition. West Virginia's added plenty of pass rushers. There's my TV remote fell there. I was going to turn the schedule release on max on my TV, but I got to change the batteries in my remote, so I'm going to try and pull it up here on the PC momentarily. But as far as Oxley's data as a pass rusher here, experienced pass rusher, been productive at both JUCO as well as his time at Colorado State, recorded a dozen sacks, and was a productive piece of the Rams defense on a per-snap basis. Oxley appeared in a total of 11 games with 203 snaps, which was productive, of course, with the 5.5 TFLs and the 4 sacks. And his grades here are really impressive as well. 72.7 overall grade, and posted a strong pass rushing grade of 77. So that's really good there, especially being as young as he was at that time, putting up those type of numbers. And now, of course, a bit more seasoned. So excited about the addition here of Marshon Oxley. That's coming in for the Mountaineers, but let's take a look at a couple of his plays here while we're still waiting. We got about a little under 10 minutes here. Let's take a look at a few plays here from his huddle. I'll try and link this after the fact in the video description if you guys want to check out the whole thing, but let's check out some Marshon Oxley highlights here. He's coming off the edge there. Look at that. That's good. Not only the speed, but a good bit of power there. Put the arm into the chest of the blocker and drive him back. He does a good job using his hands. It's not just pure speed getting around the edge. He also has some good technique with it. There's a bit more of the speed rush of him getting around the edge there on that one. Oh, blowed that up, running play straight up right there. That's what you want to see coming screaming downhill with that. Check out one more here. There you see a good use of the hands again, and combining that with the speed to get to the quarterback, get the sack, and force the fumble there as you saw the ball pop out. So there's just a quick 30 seconds or so of his highlights, but that's a 7-minute highlight tape on Huddle there if you want to check out more on Marshon Oxley. But I think getting him this late in the process and getting him, kind of unexpectedly, a bit of a steal for West Virginia, for sure. I like that. I like what West Virginia is doing on the defensive side, adding a ton of defensive backs to revamp that secondary, and then a ton of pass rushers to go along with it. So they're trying to get both sides of the things that you need there to improve your pass defense, both the pass rush and, of course, having that good coverage on the back end. I think West Virginia's added pieces that can do both of those things, so excited about that. Still a little over 5 minutes away from the schedule release starting, so one more thing I wanted to share. I'm sure some people have talked about this previously, and you guys have probably seen this by now, but still interesting, and it is of note for us as Mountaineer fans, and I'll tell you why. But the Silver Bulletin sharing this, and I think it's on Bucknuts as well. I think I'll pull that up momentarily. But West Virginia head coach Neal Brown reportedly a candidate for the vacant Ohio State offensive coordinator position. Brown, whose offenses have been highly ranked, runs a spread system similar to Ohio State's, which that is true. His system is kind of similar to what Ohio State has been running. And we do know Neal Brown had success as a coordinator prior to being a head coach. But I think that one reason we have to keep an eye on this is, let me pull it up from Bucknuts as well, is because the fact that this plays into how much money West Virginia will owe Neal Brown based on the buyout, because whatever job he takes is going to offset that. So if he was to go somewhere like Ohio State, where they're going to pay, him as a coordinator almost probably close to what he made as a head coach here at WVU, that would almost completely offset a lot of the buyout that West Virginia would owe him. So something to keep an eye on here, as Bucknuts also, I believe that's the 247 Ohio State site, also listed him as a candidate when they were talking about candidates for their offensive coordinator job, which of course is open since Chip Kelly goes to the Raiders to take the offensive coordinator job there under new Raiders head coach Pete Carroll. But Neal Brown, they call him an offensive guru here, but his time at West Virginia flatline, 37-35 career record, including 25-28 in conference play. But his offensive philosophy is spread and balanced, would be an ideal fit for Ohio State, which makes the transition to a new QB in 2025. With what will be likely a pass-centric attack with Julian Sayin under center, Brown has no ties to Ohio State, but is a respected offensive mind. And, of course, this article originates on 247 Sports. So interesting there, but it's something to keep an eye on with him being mentioned as a candidate, like I said, because wherever Neal Brown ends up helps determine how much money West Virginia will owe him, with the language there in the contract of how the buyout works. So something to keep an eye on is Neal Brown's landing spot, and him landing at a blue blood like that would be a good scenario for West Virginia as far as having to be able to save some money, which is big for us at this point, right? Can help us get some more pieces in that spring transfer window and do a good job in it like they've done in this recent portal window. So excited about that, guys, but we're getting really close here. We're just about 5 minutes away from the schedule coming out. Catch up on some of your all's comments before we get to that. Appreciate everybody being in here. Got a decent amount of people in here for this being an early morning live stream, and appreciate that. But whether you're watching live or on a playback, you can help us out here on the Country Roads webcast just by hitting that thumbs up button, giving the video a like. It really helps a ton with the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel for future Mountaineer football coverage on the roster as it builds, everything involved there with the football program. We try and keep you up to date on here on the CRW as we're about to learn about the schedule here, and appreciate you guys doing those couple things if you would. But let me catch up in the chat for those that are on here live. Caleb31 says, let's go. Ready for Rich Rod 2.0 era kickoff. That's right. Let's find out who the victims are going to be for Rich Rod in his return, right? Liam Wright says, let's go Ears. Needs my thoughts on Neal Brown to Ohio State rumor. Personally, don't think it's happening. Hey, right on cue, Liam. That's funny. I didn't see your comment until, afterwards, after I just talked about it a little bit there. And personally, I would be surprised if it ends up happening, because I feel like he's probably a little bit down the list from maybe them promoting from within, or maybe going after, Will Stein at Oregon or somebody like that. So I feel like if it does end up being Neal Brown, a couple of other guys may have turned them down or something. But it would be honestly positive for us as far as the money we would owe him being a lot less if he does go to Ohio State. So something to keep in mind there and something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. Stranger things have happened for sure. For sure. Caleb31 says that JUCO guy looks legit, explosive, fast, and a hard hitter. Yeah, I think it's an absolute steal, especially getting him this late in the process, kind of unexpectedly, where we weren't expecting that to come in, really. I wasn't, not Marshon Oxley anyways. There's some others that I'm expecting to come in hopefully today, and with it being, which if you guys don't know, today's actually also National Signing Day. Of course, everything kind of happens on early signing day in December now, but they still have the National Signing Day in February, and of course that is technically today, so that's why you may see some other names come in, and Marshon Oxley announced a couple of days prior to that. Linda Skidmore says, think Tyrell Russell could find himself in the running back room. Hey, you never know what could happen. Linda. That's one thing to keep an eye on as we get here into the spring, is how these position rooms shake out, who ends up where. I'm going to do a roster update. I'm going to try and hopefully get that out tomorrow on the channel. That's the plan. And for channel members, you guys are going to get a behind-the-scenes look at me as I record the video, and you guys will have early access to the video via that, and that's something I'm going to try and keep doing here for channel members, which if you want to hit the join button down below and help this mic keep recording and help that camera keep rolling, we really appreciate that support, and you get bonus content for doing so as well. But that's the plan for the first roster update, and of course those will continue to come throughout the spring, into the summer, and into the fall until they lead up to becoming depth chart updates throughout the season. But 10:59, guys, getting close here to the schedule release show here coming out. Like I said, if you guys that weren't in here earlier aren't tuned in on your side, I'm not going to be able to share it on the screen or anything, of course, unfortunately. But if you want to tune in yourself, I'll talk about it as it goes along, and I'll try and share the updates on WVU schedule. But if you want to tune in, I'm tuned in on Max, but it's also going to be on ESPNU, ESPN Plus, FS2, and True TV as they release the Big 12 schedule here. Just moments away now. Take a swig of my coffee, guys. Trey Edwards got to renew his membership, he said. Let me, I can share the link in chat for you guys in here live. Sometimes the join button I know doesn't show up on certain devices, so let me try and do that really quickly. Let's see here. Membership link. There we go. All right, I'm going to drop it in the chat now, Trey. And as well, the show is now live also. I'm going to try and throw these headphones on, and I'm going to try and play the audio. Sometimes if I play the audio along with this, the mic starts sounding distorted. So if it starts sounding distorted, let me know. I'll just mute the audio that I'm listening to, and I'll just watch the show as it plays along. Let's see here. See what they're talking about, guys. All right, can you guys still hear me all right? Or is the mic distorted with me playing this video? Because I know sometimes it'll do that. Let me know in the chat if it's distorted. I can mute the video if I need to, but... So they're going over this by hour. I'm trying to keep you guys updated on the West Virginia side as it comes out. So I guess it's from 11 to noon. But hopefully they're going to dive into this right away. They're talking like it is. Appreciate that, Adam Tumlin. Good. So that's cool. I can hear what they're saying, and I can still keep the audio going here. So that's the key to it, I think, is pulling it up in a separate browser. I usually try and do a separate tab. Oh, so they're showing Arizona's schedule first. So I bet they're doing this alphabetically, which means West Virginia's probably going to be last, guys, which is just our luck. So Arizona's schedule is going to be Hawaii. I don't know who that second team is in the non-con. Kansas State. Then they got Iowa State, Oklahoma State, BYU, Houston, Colorado, Kansas, Cincinnati, Baylor, and then I can't see the last team. They just got away. I could also pull up Twitter. I'm sure as they come out, people may leak pictures of them, and I can share them with you guys on the screen. Let's see here. Oh, they've actually dropped the whole thing on Twitter already. So let me just share this with you guys. Even better, we don't have to wait for West Virginia to come up on the show, which means we don't have to sit here for an hour. I don't have to keep you guys in anticipation. Hey, W Wildman 82 is a new member. Appreciate that. I see that W Wildman 82 on there. Let me pull that up here. Appreciate that a lot, man. You're always super supportive of WVU 82. Can't ever thank you enough. And you'll have access to that bonus content and get that behind-the-scenes look at the WVU football roster update that I'm hopefully planning on dropping tomorrow. But here is the conference schedule, the full matrix here. So West Virginia, at Ohio, at Pitt. Let me go ahead. I'm going to fill this in, and then I will pull it up and show you guys West Virginia's full schedule momentarily. I'm going to fill this in here from this. So we got who? At Kansas on 9/20. And then we're going to go take on, we got Utah this year. We'll get them in Morgantown, which I like that. I like getting them in Morgantown. I'm going to give further thoughts on this when I'll pull up the full West Virginia schedule and show it on screen for you guys. I'm going to just show just the West Virginia site for you all. 10/4. We're at BYU in October there. Then we got a bye week, and then we will go to UCF on the 18th. So back to Orlando. We played there season before last. Had a good game. Hopefully be able to repeat that again. Let's see. Then we got TCU in November. And then, let's see, 11-1, we are at Houston. Okay. All right, guys, I'm working on getting this typed out so I can show you guys the full WVU schedule on screen. Bear with me. I'm trying to do this on the fly while looking at this small little matrix here. It isn't the most easy, but I've almost got the full West Virginia schedule typed up here. A couple more games left here. So Colorado's coming to Morgantown. That's interesting. That's one of the more interesting matchups here. Dion versus Rich Rod will be a great storyline, an absolute cinema, if you will. And then we got at Arizona State. So we'll be taking on the defending Big 12 champions in their home in late November. That's interesting. I like that. Then another bye week is late, and then we play Texas Tech last game of the season again. Last year we played them last game of the season in their place. This year we get them in Morgantown. Okay. So I believe I've got the full schedule here now, guys. And I'm about to share it on screen. Momentarily make sure I got all 12 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep. Okay. So there's the look at the full Big 12 schedule, guys. But now let's take a look at the Mountaineers schedule here itself. Now that it's been leaked on social media already, which, of course, if you still want to watch the show, it'll be on through noon, and we'll get to hear them talk about the West Virginia schedule there probably towards the tail end. They're talking about Baylor now. Seems like they're going through it alphabetically. But we can talk about West Virginia's schedule ourselves here, guys. So let me know in the chat your thoughts on this schedule. I'm going to go through it here kind of piece by piece. Let me zoom this out here so we can get a full look at the entire schedule. But this is the 2025 WVU football schedule officially now revealed, guys. This is what we're looking at. August 30th, first game of the season, of course, Robert Morris. These non-con games we kind of knew about. But September 6th, we'll go on the road to take on Ohio. Then, of course, 9-13 against Pitt. How fitting in Rich Rod's return that is the date and that is the game that is going to be absolutely insane. Can't wait to see that atmosphere for that one. But then here's what we didn't know. We kind of knew who we'd play in conference, but didn't know where these games would line up, how they would line up. And looking at it now, I kind of like the way that it lines up because no back-to-back away games. The Big 12 treated us to that. The only time that we do have the back-to-back away games right here at BYU and UCF, there was a bye week in between there. So that is nice for us, with as much as we have to travel in the Big 12 conference. But here's how it shakes out. First Big 12 game of the season, September 20th, on the road against Kansas. I feel like that's been such a theme for us ever since we've been in the Big 12, or at least in, the recent years. Kansas is one of our very first or second Big 12 games every year, it seems like. So we'll go to Kansas to start Big 12 play there on September 20th. Then on September 27th, we will play Utah in Morgantown, and I think a lot of our fans are going to be excited for that one. Utah is a fan base that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. You've heard me and Steven and Brad talk about that on our podcast in the past, and I think that we were saying from the beginning of last season there were plenty of West Virginia predictions we didn't get right, us and a lot of others, because of the way the team was overhyped prior to the season. But one thing we did get right was saying that Utah would not win the Big 12. We felt like, coming in, that was kind of reminiscent of when Louisville first came into the old Big East, thinking they were going to run things and it just wasn't going to happen. Yes, they lost Cam Rising, but nowhere near the year they thought they'd have. We'll see what happens this year when they're in Morgantown and see if they're predicted as highly versus how West Virginia's predicted. And that's going to be a fun, early Big 12 home game for West Virginia as Utah coming into Morgantown. And I think they're going to be in for a nice raucous crowd there. But then the next week, so West Virginia gets Utah and BYU back-to-back, funny enough. West Virginia hits the road to take on BYU on October 4th. BYU coming off a really good season. Looked like they were going to be the favorite all year long before they kind of slipped late there. But West Virginia has to head to Provo, tough place to play. The Mountaineers will head there to begin October there on October 4th. Then you get your first bye week of the season. So the good thing about West Virginia's schedule is kind of the latter portion of the season where the games matter more. You have 2 bye weeks. You have one in October, you have one in November. I guess the kind of downside to that is you have to play, essentially the first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight weeks without a bye week to begin the season. Then you have 2 bye weeks in your final 6. So if you can make it through those first 6 weeks with a halfway decent record, you should, have a chance to have more pieces healthy down the latter portion of your schedule when things really matter. So that's the plus side of it. It just depends on what side of that coin you want to look at, I think, there for this schedule. But now we get into the back half of it here, and West Virginia will hit the road after a bye week and go to Orlando, to the Bounce House there, take on UCF on October 18th. Like I said, West Virginia in their first meeting there had good success against the UCF Knights. Hopefully they're able to repeat that this visit and do that again. Then we go October 25th against the TCU Horned Frogs back at home. TCU will be a team I think that's probably going to be highly regarded going into the season within the conference. We'll see. West Virginia returns to Houston. Haven't played there since, the dreaded game we shall not speak of previously, but that's how you begin November 1st on the road at Houston. I think that Willie Fritz, really kind of turn things around towards the latter portion of the season, and it was a really good testament to how good of a coach he is, because that Houston team looked like the cupboard was left bare by Dana yet again, of which we've been able to experience in the past as Mountaineer fans. But there at Houston, Willie Fritz, finds a way to win some games, and I think he's going to continue to build that. I think he's probably still another year or 2 away, so even though this one being on the road, this game West Virginia probably should win. But then you come back home to what I think is going to be one of the big November showdowns here. I think in back-to-back weeks, you're going to have big-time showdowns, because November 8th, I don't know what Colorado's going to look like record-wise by this point, or what WVU is going to look like record-wise by this point. But you look at just the matchup of the coaches alone is going to be a storyline. Coach Prime and Rich Rod, that'll be fun. But Colorado coming into Morgantown, a lot of people are going to want to go to that game and be at that one. That's going to be a good atmosphere. I think when you look at the home slate for the Mountaineers, of course, we still have one more home game to talk about there to end the season, but 9-13 versus Pitt, it's going to be an amazing atmosphere. Rich Rod's returning, first, game against kind of a bigger opponent. No offense to Bobby Moe there, Robert Morris. That's going to be a huge environment. Then I talked about the Utah coming to Morgantown. People are going to be excited about that game. And then, of course, Colorado here. And then, so I think that the home slate's looking really nice. TCU may be a contender in the conference, as I mentioned. So I like the home slate that West Virginia has here. And on the schedule this year, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home games, so it's pretty much an even split, as where last year you had 7. But I think this year you have some more marquee matchups at home, and hopefully you do a better job. I know last year's home record left a lot to be desired, but when you look at home games, this one here on November 8th will be one a lot of people want to attend, as West Virginia takes on Colorado there, Coach Prime versus Rich Rod. And then, like I said, back-to-back premier matchups on the schedule coming in November. When things are important, you're going to have some really big-time matchups, and one of them here against the defending Big 12 champs here. You go on the road to Tempe to play Arizona State, the next to last game of the season for you, third to last week of the season there, as you do have your next bye week after this game. But West Virginia taking on Arizona State will be interesting, especially having to go there to Tempe late in the season. But what I like here is you get a bye week following that game before you have to come home, play your senior day game, and you do get a chance to get, a little revenge on Texas Tech after they absolutely slaughtered you in the season-ending game this year at Texas Tech. You get them for the season-ending game this year in Morgantown, and hopefully you're in a better spot, have a week to kind of get right. If you do have, those games that are highly contested, hard fought against Colorado and Arizona State in back-to-back weeks, get a bye week, come back home, hopefully finish the season the right way. So that's the schedule as it looks like for the Mountaineers. Just to run through it one more time. We have Robert Morris at Ohio, come home against Pitt, take on Kansas on the road, at home against Utah, on the road against BYU, off week, and then on the road against UCF, at home against TCU, on the road against Houston, at home against Colorado, and then on the road at Arizona State. And then, of course, you finish the season back at home on November 29th against Texas Tech. So there's the Mountaineers schedule revealed for 2025. Kind of my initial thoughts there, just kind of off the top reactions, I guess, as it's revealed. But let me catch up and see if you guys have shared any of yours thoughts here in the chat on the schedule. Take a swig of my coffee real quick. Channel member Big Dan T says, tough 3-game stretch to end the season, but looking forward to it. Yes, it is. It's definitely going to be kind of a prove-it stretch there. But I guess that's what you want there in November. You want to be playing in games that matter, and if you've proven yourself to be a contender through the front portion of the season, you're really going to set yourself up for some, like I said, marquee matchups there late in the schedule, especially in the month of November. You got Houston to start it off. You should probably, hopefully, be favored in that game, I would think, even though it's going to be at Houston. And then 3 tough ones there. But if you can find ways to win those, you're looking really good as you take on Colorado at home on November 8th, Arizona State on the road on the 15th, and then, of course, back at home 2 weeks later against Texas Tech. Definitely a tough 3-game stretch in the season. Agree with that, Big Dan T. Hey, Trey Edwards renewing his channel membership as well. Appreciate that, Trey. Appreciate that. Hey, channel member Nate Scott says, let's go. Hey, let's go Mountaineers, Nathan. Let's go. Trey Edwards says, took a little longer than expected. Yeah, I know. I'm surprised. I think a lot of people have said that it took a long time for the Big 12 to release the schedule. And a lot of people were surprised it took so long. I'm glad that it came out at a time where I was actually able to kind of talk about it as it's revealed live. That's pretty cool. I will say that for it. Trey Edwards says, we have a chance to go 11-1 and win the Big 12 with this schedule. Interesting. That's cool. Everyone, I'm going to pull it up here in a second, and everyone that's in here live, if you want to, share your thoughts on what you think, just initial way too early reaction to what you think West Virginia's record may be with this schedule. I'll do that as well. I'll kind of go through it and give just an initial gut wrench, way too early reaction, because like I said, we don't even know what the roster is going to fully look like yet, so a way too early reaction. Our true thoughts will come with our season prediction roundtable show that we always kick off the podcast season, which will kick off our 8th season this year in August when we get to that, but we can all do that. Let's do some initial reactions to what do you think our record can be with this schedule. Trey saying 11-1, and I do think this kind of is a favorable schedule when I look at it for the Mountaineers. Some tough games in there, don't get me wrong, but I like where everything is slated on the initial look. I'm going to go over and give mine here in a second, and as I go over it, maybe you guys can help formulate yours and throw them in the chat there as well. Texas Tech might be a little rough, but at home, probably prime time, that'll be great. Yeah, especially I like coming off a bye week with it. I do like that. The only game we lose is Arizona State. He says ceiling 11-1 and floor 9-4. Hey, I like that. All right, let's do it then. Let's go through it, and everyone else can, if you guys want to, share your thoughts on maybe a floor and a ceiling initially, just, gut wrench reaction off the dome, first time looking at this schedule, if you will. But I think that West Virginia has a great chance to go 3-0 in non-con for the first time in a long time, which would be great. West Virginia hasn't even started 1-0. Since 2019? Was that the last time? Neal Brown's first year, I think, when we beat James Madison. I believe that was the last time we even started 1-0. I don't think we've done that since then, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe 2020? I can't remember. I'd have to look at the schedule right off, but it's been a while, regardless. Versus Robert Morris at home, should win that game. Now, don't overlook at Ohio. I know it's a lot easier non-con schedule than we've had in the past because we don't have the second Power 5 team. Instead, we've got the Group of 5 team here with Ohio. But Ohio's a good Group of 5 team. They are undergoing a coaching change. Who did end up getting that Ohio job? I think it was the coach from Charlotte, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check on that and see here to be 100% sure. Ohio football head coach. Is it Tim Albin? No, their coach was Tim Albin. He took the Charlotte job. That's my mistake. Brian Smith is the new head coach here at Ohio, so that's who took the job there. So they are bringing in a new head coach, but also playing there is going to be, you're going to have to be on your A game still yet, despite it being a Group of 5 opponent, but West Virginia probably should win that game. Pitt, let's be honest, West Virginia should have beat Pitt this season, and Pitt kind of fell apart in the back half of the season, and I think there is no shot Rich Rod doesn't win this game, just in my personal opinion. I think he's going to be out for blood in this one, so I think West Virginia's going to go 3-0 in non-con. So then you get into the Big 12 slate, where it gets, of course, more tough and more interesting. You look on the road at Kansas on September 20th. I think West Virginia can win that game. Yeah, let's give it to him. Let's say you start Big 12 play 1-0, you're 4-0 overall. Think you come back home against Utah. That's tough, but at home, good crowd. First Big 12 game for Rich Rod at home. West Virginia 5-0. I think you got a good start to the season going here. But then I think you go on the road to Provo, BYU if they're even close to what they were last season. I think I could give you a loss there. Just initial reaction. Like I said, this is just off the top of my head. This is not official predictions by any means, guys. Our season prediction roundtable show always comes in August. Everything will change by then when I learn more about each of these teams, when I learn more about West Virginia's roster. But for now, I'll have them going into the bye week at 5-1. Coming out of the bye week, going on the road to UCF. I think West Virginia is in a better spot with Rich Rod back than UCF is with Scott Frost back, at least initially. I think Scott Frost could have a chance to get UCF rolling now. He's going to be coaching them with him being out of power conference, in a power conference. So, but we'll see what happens. I think West Virginia gets that win, goes to 6-1. Then I think you play TCU at home, and this is where I think you get your first home loss of the season. I think TCU is going to be a contender this year probably, so I think you drop to 6-2 there. On the road at Houston, I think you should win that game to start November. You go at 7-2, and I think if you're 7-2 going into the final stretch here with 3 games left, obviously we're talking about not only battling for a spot in the Big 12 title game, but battling for a potential college football playoff spot, right? Which will be crazy, but it can be done. We saw, Kurt Signetti comes from James Madison to Indiana, get them to the playoff. It can be done. They did a roster overhaul. Rich Rod's doing a roster overhaul here. He had success with the roster overhaul last year, won a conference title at Jack State. So I think West Virginia can be successful, and I like the way that this schedule shapes up, at least initially. But if you're going in at 7-2, final game of the season here, 11-8 versus Colorado, that's a tough one. But I think that crowd is going to help you get that win. I put you at 8-2. At Arizona State, I think that's going to be just tough. I'll put you at 8-3. And then I think you come back here, you get the bye week. I think that helps you. Texas Tech's going to be tough, though. They have the number 1 portal class in the country. They dominated you last year, so maybe revenge is a factor, but also how big of that revenge factor is going to be in play when most of that roster for you is gone. So I think just looking at it initially on paper, Texas Tech has the more talented roster. They were leagues better than West Virginia last season. Even though you have the bye week, you get them at home. I like that, improving your chances. I think I have you dropping this one. So I'll put West Virginia 8-4, looking at this schedule initially, which would be fantastic. That'd be a fantastic first season for Rich Rod coming in, get you to 8-4, go get you a bowl game win. Maybe, you get to 9-4, and who knows if that 8-4 could maybe even get you a shot if the Big 12 is crazy enough. We saw how tumultuous it was last season. If you do good in conference, could still have a chance of getting to the conference title game even with that record. So that's what I got kind of initially looking at it. My thoughts, I think West Virginia could go 8-4. Now, I don't think that's the ceiling. I think much like Trey Edwards said, you could look at, maybe a 10-win season. I think he said 11. I think 10, maybe 11 if I'm feeling extra froggy, if I'm really putting the gold and blue glasses on. But I think definitely, a double-digit win seasons is the ceiling. And I think looking at the schedule, just my gut thought, I think the floor is 6-6. You're at least getting to a bowl game bare minimum with this schedule, in my opinion, and with the pieces that West Virginia's already added, and we'll see how the rest of the roster shapes up. So that's kind of my thoughts, just with initial reaction. Let's see if you guys have shared any of yours here in the chat. Got any thoughts here? Yeah, it looks like some people have rolled in with some. Adam Tumblin says he's like a 9-3 or 10-2, depending on how healthy we are for the gauntlet in that last 3 weeks. And yes, of course, those are always the factors that you can't predict, is injuries, what happens with the roster and all of that throughout the season, especially with how tough that final 3 weeks could be for WVU. That is a tough stretch, as Big Dan T said there, but Adam Tumblin saying 9-3 or 10-2. It's Not Okay Golf feeling extra optimistic. He's got the gold and blue glasses on. He just went ahead and bought tickets to the Big 12 championship game, to be honest. He said, hey, I love that. I love that. It's Not Okay Golf. I hope so, man. I hope so. Trey Edwards says, but Arizona State is losing Scatterboo, and I think their QB was a one-year wonder for some reason, kind of like GG. Yeah, but they added the running back from Army, who was really good this year, to replace Scatterboo, and they have a lot of the other pieces back. I think their quarterback was a freshman, and obviously Kenny Dillingham doing really good things early, so probably only going to get better. Yes, they are losing their best player in Scatterboo, so that will affect them probably, but I still think they're going to be really good for sure. Edwards says, wait, we should play in Houston at home. We lost them on the road 2 years ago. Isn't that how it works? Once you play away, you don't play again until they play at home. I think that, when you added the 4 new teams, it kind of just completely reset all of that because, West Virginia never got that return trip last year. And I guess now where it kind of rotates, where there's 16 teams and you only play 9 conference games, so you don't get to play everyone every year. I don't guess it's going to work out that way to where it's going to necessarily alternate every time because it's on the road. Unless let me make sure that that's right here. Let me take a look here. Yeah, at Houston. Yeah, that's right here, according to the Big 12's official release. So, yeah, I guess it's not going to necessarily work out that way. I'm guessing maybe if you play them like in the very next year, it will alternate. But I guess if there's a year in between where you don't play each other, it won't necessarily work out that way. Big Dan T says it's hard because they have no clue what we are yet. 100% agree. That's why I say no official predictions by any means. This is just something fun to do now that we know the schedule because a lot of things can change between now and August. But Big Dan T agrees that 6 is the floor, and he thinks the ceiling could be 12. He said, just can't wait to use the season tickets. Hold the rope. Same here. Already renewed mine, man. Already renewed them. Had to. Definitely worth it here. It's going to be a fun year. Trey Edwards says we're ranked 22nd by 927. Yeah, I think the initial part of the schedule is favorable for us, which is good because how we have to play the first 6 weeks without a bye. So I could see that happening, Trey. I could see that happening. WFan23 says have to disagree. We won't lose to TCU. I hope you're right, man. I hope you're right. I definitely think it's a game that we could win. That's honestly, when you look at the schedule, most of these I feel like are games that we could win. I don't feel like there's necessarily any game I'll look at on the schedule and say that's a guaranteed loss. I think, your toughest ones are probably on the road at Arizona State, on the road at BYU. Your tougher home games, Texas Tech, Colorado, TCU, Utah, all going to be tough. You do have a tougher home slate, especially in conference, but there's no game that I look at on the schedule and say definite loss. So I agree. You could win that game against TCU. WFan23 says he thinks we lose to BYU and Arizona State. Like I said, definitely 2 of our tougher games there. I think I had us losing both those as well. So we'll see what happens, though. Trey Edwards says he thinks by the end of it, we'll at least finally be ranked in football at least sometime during the season. If they play like Rod can make them play, we could finish in the top 25. Very well could finish in the top 25. I think that's maybe my early bold prediction is that West Virginia finishes the year in the top 25. WFan23 says overall he's going 9-3 or 10-2. So that's what seemed like a lot of people have that optimistic outlook. I think pretty much most of the projections that people have shared here have been 9-3, 10-2, 11-12 win ceilings. I think I said 8-4, but I said I could easily see, a double-digit season happening as well. Drumwolf62 says, let's go Mountaineers. He says Big 12 championship game. Here we go. Nate Scott says, does Neal Brown get the offensive coordinator at Ohio State? I don't think so, but I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. And honestly, I kind of hope he does because of how much it'll offset what West Virginia will have to pay with that buyout. Professional Carpet Systems of Raleigh says, spot the damn ball. Hey, that's right. Spot the ball. We're ready. We're ready for this. It's not okay. Golf says, guys, listen, here's what we do. All we need to say is $30 million, put $5 million on a Vegas bet for WVU to win it all, and then the other 25 go buy the best players. Hey, that's it, man. That's all. That's all we need, man. That's all we need, dude. Hey, and that's what's funny though. It's been proven now with Ohio State winning the Natty that you go out buy a good roster can win you a championship. And same goes for going out and getting a good roster, getting a good coach, and turning it over in 1 year and getting to the playoffs like Indiana did. And West Virginia may very well be able to do that with the new schedule. So let me just update one more time here before I get ready to wrap up this stream, guys. Love to stay a little bit longer in chat, but like I said, got to head to work here in a bit. So got to wrap this one up, but glad that they leaked the schedule online so we didn't have to sit here and wait for the show to do it because then I'd have really been cutting it close with my work. But if you guys aren't watching the Big 12 show, they're up to the Kansas State schedule now. Like I said, they're going through it in alphabetical order, talking about each team's schedule a little bit. So they'll be talking about the Mountaineers closer to noon if you want to tune in to that. But I can show you the schedules here as far as the entire Big 12, and let's just read through the whole Big 12 here to recap before we close up, and then I'll pull up West Virginia's schedule one final time in case anybody hopped in here late. But I appreciate you guys tuning in, whether you're watching live or in a playback. Either way, if you hit the thumbs up button on the video, just that little thing right there really helps this video out a ton, pushes it out to more Mountaineer football fans like yourself. And if you are a WVU football fan, be sure you're subscribed here to the channel. We're covering all things WVU football and keeping you up to date with what's going on throughout Mountaineer Nation. But as far as the Big 12 slates here, We do have a couple of week 0 games here in the Big 12, one of them being Farmageddon, which is pretty cool. You get an early Big 12 game of Kansas State and Iowa State playing in week 0, and then also Kansas plays Fresno State in week 0. Those are the only 3 Big 12 teams playing in week 0. So that's, just a little bit of an update on that. Then everything else is from week 1 on. I'm just going to go through each team schedule here. So Arizona schedule here is August 30th against Hawaii, September 6th against Weber State, September 13th against K-State, September 27th against Iowa State, October 4th they take on Oklahoma State, October 11th they take on BYU, October 18th they go on the road to Houston, November 1st they play Colorado, then November 8th they play Kansas at home, November 15th on the road at Cincinnati, November 22nd they play Baylor at home, and then November 29th they're on the road at Arizona State. And then speaking of Arizona State, they played Northern Arizona to open up the season. Then they'll go to Mississippi State, take on Texas State at home, hit the road to take on Baylor, play TCU at home, then go on the road to Utah, at home against Texas Tech, at home against Houston, on the road against Iowa State. Then they play us at home, and then they go on the road to play Colorado, and then at home against Arizona to wrap up the season. So from what I've seen from West Virginia's schedule, and then the other team schedules that I've went over thus far, we'll see if it remains true as I go through the others. Seems like the Big 12 really did their best to try and not make any team have back-to-back away games where there's so much travel in this conference, and if you do, you have a bye week in between from what we've seen thus far. Let's see if that remains true, though. Baylor, for their season, they play Auburn, and then they play at, who is that? Is that SMU? Yeah, at SMU, I believe, second game of the season for Baylor. It's hard to see when you got 16 teams here in this matrix. Then they play Samford at home, Arizona State at home, on the road at Oklahoma State, then back home to play Kansas State, on the road at TCU, on the road at Cincinnati, at home against UCF. Then they're at home again after a bye week. They take on Utah. Then they're on the road at Arizona, and then back home against Houston to wrap up the season. And then BYU, they will take on Portland State and Stanford before a bye week, and then they wrap up their non-con on the road against East Carolina. Then they are at Colorado to begin Big 12 play. Of course, they take on the Mountaineers at home on October 4th. Then they're on the road at Arizona. They play Utah at home. So the Holy War there is on October 18th in Provo. On the road at Iowa State on October 25th. Then they have a bye week before they get into their November slate, and they have 4 straight games in November where they play at Texas Tech, at home against TCU, at Cincinnati, and then at home against UCF. Then you have UCF here. Their schedule, they play Jack State to open the season, which that'll be an interesting game to see, first-year coach Charles Kelly at Jack State, and then, of course, Scott Frost in his first year back at UCF. Clint Trickett, now the offensive coordinator at Jack State, so that'll be interesting to watch Jack State take on UCF. But then they played North Carolina A&T and UNC to wrap up their non-con schedule. Then they get into the Big 12 play. They take on Kansas State on the road. They're at home against Kansas. They're on the road at Cincinnati. They play West Virginia at home. Then in their November schedule, their November is pretty brutal due to the fact they play 5 straight games here, with 3 of them being away games. They play on the road at Baylor, at home against Houston, on the road at Texas Tech, at home against Oklahoma State, and on the road at BYU. Cincinnati, they play Nebraska to open the season. That'll be a fun week 1 game there on August 30th. So Cincinnati plays Nebraska, Bowling Green, and Northwestern State in non-con. They are at Kansas to begin Big 12 play. Then they go home against Iowa State, home against UCF, on the road against Oklahoma State, home against Baylor, on the road to Utah, and then they wrap up their schedule with 3 straight games in November, home against Arizona, home against BYU, and on the road at TCU. The Colorado Buffaloes in Coach Prime's schedule, they've played Georgia Tech in non-con. That'll be a good August. So some good week 0 and week 1 games this year, just from looking at, some of the teams that the Big 12 teams play here. Georgia Tech on August 30th will be a good one, Georgia Tech in Colorado. Then they play Delaware. Then they're on the road at Houston. And then they play Wyoming. Then they get into their final rest of their Big 12 slate. So they got a little break in there in their non-con. They play Houston early before they finish up non-con against Wyoming. Then their Big 12 slate, they play at home against BYU, at TCU, at home against Iowa State, at Utah, home against Arizona, at West Virginia on November 8th, of course. And then they have 2 games there to wrap up their November slate against Arizona State at home and then on the road against Kansas State. Houston, their non-conference consists of Stephen F. Austin at Rice and then, of course, at Oregon State. Like I said, they have that game against Colorado kind of sandwiched in their non-con slate there. The rest of their Big 12 schedule, home against Texas Tech, at Oklahoma State, at home against Arizona, at Arizona State, and then, of course, they play the Mountaineers on November 1st. We'll play them at Houston. And then at UCF on November 8th for the Cougars. Then they wrap up their schedule with TCU at home and then Baylor on the road. Iowa State, as we mentioned, opens the season with Farmageddon in week 0. That's going to be a lot of fun, guys, seeing Iowa State and Kansas State play to open the season there on August 23rd. Then they play South Dakota State and Iowa to wrap up their non-con there. So, or excuse me, not wrap up their non-con because they play at Arkansas State. Forgot their first game was the Big 12 game there against K-State. So they play Arkansas State to wrap up their non-con. Then get into their Big 12 slate where they'll play Arizona, at Cincy, and at Colorado. They'll have a bye week before they take on BYU and Arizona State at home in back-to-back weeks. That's a tough little matchup there, but they do get them at home. Then they go play at TCU, and they wrap up their schedule with Kansas at home and at Oklahoma State. And then speaking of the Jayhawks, they'll play Fresno State in week 0, the other Big 12 team that plays in week 0 besides Iowa State and Kansas State. Then they play Wagner and at Missouri for their non-con. Then, of course, their first Big 12 game is the Mountaineers in Lawrence there on September 20th. Then they'll play at home against Cincinnati, on the road at UCF, at Texas Tech. Then they will go into October 25th where they'll play Kansas State at home. They'll play Oklahoma State at home, and then they'll play at Arizona before they wrap up their schedule at Iowa State and then at home against Utah. So a tough final 2 games there for the Jayhawks. Kansas State, like we said, starting the year against Iowa State on week 0. Then they'll play North Dakota and Army. So tough little schedule there to begin their non-con. They're at Arizona. Then they play UCF at home. Then they're at Baylor at home against TCU. At Kansas in October. Then they begin November at home against Texas Tech. And then their final 3 games will be at Oklahoma State, at Utah, and then, of course, against Colorado, final game of the season there in Manhattan. And then the Oklahoma State Cowboys, they got UT Martin to open the season. They're at Oregon, really tough game there for Oklahoma State, coming off a year where they really struggled. They have an extremely tough non-con game there on the road at Oregon and Eugene. Then they'll have a bye week before they play Tulsa at home. Then they get into their Big 12 schedule, which will be Baylor at home, at Arizona, against Houston at home, against Cincinnati at home, at Texas Tech, at Kansas. So I think that's the first time we've gotten this deep in the schedule before I've seen back-to-back away games without a bye week. So Big 12 seems like they did the best they could to avoid that as much as possible. But then they play, to wrap up their slate, they play Kansas State at home, at UCF, and then Iowa State to end their season. TCU, they play, who is that first game right there? Is that UNC? I think is that at UNC? I can't quite tell what that says. I think they play North Carolina. It might be UNC right there. Not 100% though on their first game of the season. But other than that, they play Abilene Christian and SMU. I doubt that's UNC. That might be UNI. Maybe it's Northern Iowa because I don't think they're going to play 2 Power 5s in the non-con. But then their Big 12 slate is at Arizona State, at home against Colorado, at Kansas State, at home against Baylor, at West Virginia, of course, on November 1st, October 25th. Then they have their bye week, and then their November slate is 4 straight games, though. Iowa State at home, at BYU, at Houston, and home against Cincinnati. Texas Tech plays Arkansas Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State in the non-conference schedule. Then they will play at Utah, at Houston, against Kansas at home, at Arizona State, at home against Oklahoma State, at K-State, at home against BYU, at home against UCF, and then, of course, they wrap up their season at West Virginia, and they'll also have a bye week the week before that game as well. And then Utah, lastly, before we talk about the Mountaineer schedule one more time, just to wrap up, Utah at UCLA, they play Cal Poly, and they play on the road at Wyoming. So 2 of their 3 non-con games are on the road. Then they play Texas Tech at home. They play, of course, in Morgantown. Then they'll play Arizona State at home. They'll play at BYU. They'll play Colorado and Cincinnati at home. And then they'll wrap up their schedule at Baylor, at home against Kansas State, and then finally on the road against Kansas. So, takes a long time to read through 15 other teams, of course, but wanted to give you guys a quick recap here for the schedule reveal. And then lastly, the one that we're really concerned about is the Mountaineers here. our schedule for the 2025 season officially. August 30th at home against Robert Morris. September 6th on the road at Ohio. September 13th at home versus the Pittsburgh Panthers. September 20th on the road at Kansas. September 27th at home versus Utah. October 4th on the road at BYU. First bye week of the season, and then you're on the road again at UCF on October 18th. Back at home on October 25th versus TCU. And then in November, you will take on Houston on the road, Colorado at home, Arizona State on the road. Then you get another bye week before you wrap up the season back at home to take on Texas Tech. So there is the Mountaineers' 12 games for the 2025 season here. And we have accomplished our goal, which was to reveal the West Virginia schedule. But like I said, if you guys want to tune into the Big 12 show, they'll be talking about the Mountaineers soon here before they wrap it up. But I'm going to wrap this up, guys. I got to get ready to head to work, but I appreciate you guys tuning into this one that tuned in live, or if you watched it on a playback. Either way, I really appreciate that. Like I said, I'll have another video coming soon with the WVU football roster update here, probably coming out tomorrow. And for you channel members, you'll have early access to that. And I can't ever thank you guys enough for being channel members and your support, but I also appreciate the support that's fast, easy, and free, which is the thumbs up button and just subscribing to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything, and you get that extra WVU football updates, including the one like this schedule release. Hopefully you guys are as excited about the 2025 season as I am, and this new schedule has done nothing but raise those expectations and the excitement for the upcoming season, because I think that we have a bit of a favorable schedule in a lot of ways, and I'm super excited to see how it pans out, guys. But we'll talk about it more in the future, and we'll talk about the WVU roster as it continues to build for that 2025 season in the near future as well. Appreciate you guys tuning into this one. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.